Hello, everybody. I hope you're having a nice evening on the cold November night. Actually, it's not that cold as far. I live in Winnipeg, so it's not that cold tonight. It's what, like -1, -2. It is. I think like 0 degrees, maybe something like that. So sometimes I do streams where I have like a prepared stream where there's like a bunch of news articles and a bunch of like topics I want to cover as kind of a to kind of sum things up. And sometimes there's just kind of a chill stream. This is going to be somewhere in between the two because there's some topics that I want to cover in this, but also it's not going to be as formal as some of my other stuff. So I wanted to talk about the whole like Israel Palestine thing, what's happening and where it's going. I think the thing, and because I've been there's been a lot of interesting discussion. I was just watching Alexander Mercouris when I had a long conversation with John Mersheimer that I was watching. Also, History Legends had on, I forget his name, but they were kind of talking about like this conflict. And I honestly just kind of have to wonder like what Bebe's end game is for all of this. Like is it to like is it the final solution to the Palestinian question to just finally expel them all to Egypt, to annex at least part of the West Bank to permanently resolve this problem? Because I honestly don't see any other solution to this crisis at this point in time, other than um, just ethnically cleansing the Palestinians one way or another. To get like workable borders in the West Bank, you would have to either remove a bunch of Israelis or remove a bunch of Palestinians or both. There's no way for either side to get like borders that would be acceptable to any sane person. So that's kind of the question. The other thing, though, that I think it's something that people haven't really thought about is why did Bebe even invade the Gaza Strip in response to Hamas? So I guess you can say like immediately, well, he had to invade the Gaza Strip because you have to do something. Hamas attacks you, you get some bad stuff happens, you have to hit back at them, you can't show weakness. But how does invading the Gaza Strip really deal with Hamas? Hamas is like a decentralized militant organization, right? So like they're gonna kill some Hamas soldiers, but I'm sure like the leadership of Hamas is probably in Qatar or somewhere else that it's decentralized into a cell system. So I think they can kill a bunch of uh, Hamas soldiers. They can maybe kill some Hamas leaders, but it's very difficult to destroy decentralized militant groups. So I don't really get how invading Gaza necessarily resolves that. It seems like it's mostly just a knee jerk reaction to try to make it look like they were doing something in the face of this devastating attack. And I mean, now that they've gone in, even if they let's say it's even possible for them to destroy Hamas, they're going to have to occupy Gaza for like a long period. They're going to have to basically, if you've been watching it all, they're basically leveling Gaza because the Israeli army is largely armor based, and they've just kind of been artillery, just using artillery and missiles to just level neighborhoods so they can move through them with like bulldozers and tanks and stuff. But I don't really see how this actually destroys Hamas in any significant way. Um, how this even really hurts Hamas, to be honest. Okay, I'm going to make the most controversial statement of the probably now, and that's that Hamas won. Hamas, I think, achieved their political objectives beyond their wildest dreams. I think even if a lot of their soldiers and a lot of their leadership is going to get killed during this, they achieved all their political objectives. It kind of reminds me a bit of the Tet Offensive. So the Tet Offensive was a big offensive that the North Vietnamese launched against the government of South Vietnam and the American forces, and it was, from a military standpoint, a failure. To my understanding, the vast majority of the Viet Cong got wiped out during it, and the Viet Cong were more or less finished as an effective fighting force, and most of the rest of the war would be fought with regulars from North Vietnam. However, despite the fact that it was a military failure, it was a massive political victory because it destroyed what remaining support there was in the United States for the Vietnamese War. So even if it was a military disaster, it was a strategic victory. And I think if we look at like what was Hamas trying to achieve with this, obviously they weren't going to destroy Israel. That was never going to happen. If the goal, and like once again, are we going to assume that Hamas is like completely insane? Are they insane, or are they people like led by rational actors who actually have a plan? I think they probably have a plan, because I don't think you can plan like coordinated attacks like that and just what they're doing at the moment without having some sort of a strategy, if you. So I do think the goal was to destroy um, the Saudi Israeli peace talks. I think the goal was to basically turn back the clock and destroy all the progress that had been made on Israeli Arab relations since basically like the Carter era. It was to do that. It was to prevent, I guess, kind of the status quo. Oh, Distributors thinks that Hamas is insane. I mean, they are like radicals, and they are like, as I've said, Hamas is a death cult, but the two things aren't mutually exclusive. You can be a terrorist organization, a death cult, and also not be like run by complete retards. Like these two things are not mutually exclusive. If anything, terrorism is largely a product of the middle class. People who tend to be terrorists are people who are ideologically motivated, often underemployed, and come from some degree of privilege. Because people who are extremely poor don't have access to really ideological materials, and they're too busy kind of scraping by. The type of people who really try to start a revolutionary or terrorist movement tend to come from the middle classes, or people who are educated and organized but don't have power within a society. So I mean, like, Hamas isn't dumb. Hezbollah isn't dumb. Um, these people aren't stupid. So I think like if the objective was to destroy Israeli Arab relations, I think they succeeded beyond their wildest dreams. Like, Israel is an international pariah now. This whole thing, like, I mean, let's look at it. You have scenarios where you have basically the entire UN voting for ceasefires, and Israel and America like being, and then a couple just random countries that the U.S. bribed voting against the ceasefire. You have the entire Islamic world. Let's just think about this for a minute. They had the big conference in I forget if it was Saudi Arabia or Qatar over the weekend, but you had Iran, Saudi Arabia, Syria, Jordan, I think. You had all these countries who a couple of years ago were all trying to wipe each other out. Like, the fact that I don't think people really get it. The fact that we're talking about Iran as a sponsor of Hamas, I think just shows how much things have changed. Because remember, like, when we had like the civil war in Iraq, the civil war in Syria, the civil war in Yemen, all of these were like proxy conflicts between Iran and Saudi Arabia. And now we have Iran and Saudi Arabia having regular diplomatic meetings. They're on the same page. They're agreeing to common foreign policies. They've set aside their differences, at least to a certain extent. Like, were they even talking to each other prior to like a year or two ago? It's like stuff has really changed, and it, Saudi Arabia has gone from like being a de facto Israeli ally to like a bitter Israeli enemy. Israel's become a complete pariah on the international stage. It's I mean, you had like this thing a couple days ago of Bebe was just yelling like, even if the whole world is against Israel, we're going to continue our operation. And it's like, dude, that's just like that's crazy. Like what is there? There is no like, is there a plan? I don't know. It's just there's no indication to me that there's any kind of exit strategy. Like to me, the single most important aspect of any war is to have a an exit strategy. Is to say what does victory look like? Like what is our basic definition of victory? What is our stretch goal? What is the minimum that we're willing to accept? You have to go into a situation with at least a minimum. Like you can have different levels of it. Like you could have just hurting Hamas versus destroying Hamas versus like whatever. But you have to have some sort of war goal, and as far as I can determine, Israel doesn't have any war goal because you can't destroy Hamas because it's a decentralized militant group whose leadership is probably hiding out in Qatar and chilling with the Qatari royalty. So, like, I realistically, I just, like, what are they hoping to achieve? Other than ethnically cleansing the Palestinians. That's basically the only way this entire thing can make sense. But like Baby like played completely into their head. Like once again, Israel was actually making progress. They had signed the treaty with Morocco. Um, they had made the treaty with Morocco. They had made the treaty with Egypt. Relations were being regularized. Things were going in a pretty decent direction. Um, as far as the Middle East goes. And then Hamas does this attack and it kills a bunch of people. But he just goes completely ape shit and starts carpet bombing like the Gaza Strip. And basically no one in the world other than the US can really get behind this and say this is a good idea or this is like a proportionate response. And now like Hamas doesn't like it's not even so much Hamas looks like the good guy. It's just Israel looks really bad. Bebe looks like this unhinged lunatic, um, like some sort of cartoon villain. So I think you could argue that Hamas achieved their political objectives, even if they get wiped out from this. I don't know. Maybe that's a controversial statement. I really don't see how it would be. But yeah, so that's how kind of that thing's been going, and I just don't know how long this thing is gonna go on. Now, the Muslim states have been pressing, have started lobbying the International Criminal Court to indict Netanyahu, which I think is fucking amazing. I think that would be like the greatest thing ever if they were to indict Netanyahu. Because remember when they indicted Putin over bullshit? Like they indicted Netanyahu because they indicted Putin because a bunch of Ukrainian children were moved out of an active war zone to a safer place or in like in the interior of Russia. Like it was kind of bullshit. But now we have literally Netanyahu like carpet bombing the West Bank. Sorry, the Gaza Strip. You have that one like Israeli minister who's talking about nuking Gaza, you just have all this insane shit that's been going on, and people are going like, why aren't you indicting these people? Like when Bebe makes his unhinged speeches, like quoting the Old Testament, why is he not getting indicted for this? Why aren't they getting indicted for bombing hospitals? And the ICC is like, fuck, we're screwed. What are we gonna do in this scenario? Because we can't indict Bebe. And also, these Western leaders had just sucked off the International Criminal Court. Like, you remember how they said it was amazing? Like, Biden said it was, like, it legitimized it even though America didn't accept it. How, like, this was a big step forward for international rule of law, that they were holding Putin accountable, and that kind of stuff. And then, yeah, the stuff happened, and now they're just kind of fucked. So if that stuff happens, then I don't really know. Like, what are they gonna do at that point? These are all very good questions to which there is no answers. Um, so they're either going to have to indict Netanyahu and some of the Israeli leadership. There's also the whole now, is this actually going to happen? I don't know. But the point is that a lot of the global south is going to push for it to happen. The Muslim world is going to push for it to happen. They're going to say, like, he should be indicted. So the ICC is now in an impossible situation because they can't indict Netanyahu. So if they indict Netanyahu, then a bunch of like Western countries who have just basically sucked off Israel and said we support everything Israel does, opposition to Israel's anti-Semitism, are going to have to go out and say, well, we said that everyone had an obligation um, to arrest Putin and all that stuff, but we didn't actually meet it. That was just irony, bro. So it's just they're in a really bad situation, and the optics are just completely fucked. So that's kind of where they are at the moment. So I just don't know if there is like an actual solution for this whole thing, or if it's just a an ongoing mess that's going to indefinitely continue. So there's that aspect to it. I was watching History Legends had a guy on. I can't recall his name, but he pointed out that if Israel actually wanted to destroy Hamas, what they would have done is told the Mossad, "The gloves are off. Do what you need to do." Um, is to just be like, look, if you want to assassinate people in Qatar, if you want to go after people in like neutral countries, if you want to like plant bombs and just do all kinds of assassinations, just go nuts. You guys have a free hand to do whatever the hell you want. They would have said that, but that's not what they did. They decided on a military campaign. I mean, I just kind of feel like if Israel was smart, what they would have done is played the victim and cried about how like it's another Shoah, it's another Holocaust, and maybe use this as a way to try to get international sympathy to get a better deal out of a better Arab peace deal, but then telling Mossad and their other like guys go and just deal with Hamas. Just behind the scenes, revenge is a dish best served cold. Just go in and attack, and just resolve this issue. Part of the problem, though, is that I think people forget about this. Most of Bebe's coalition is like the extreme right in Israel. They're like either secular ultranationalists or like religious ultranationalists. Bebe is actually like the centrist or even left wing of the coalition he's part of. But like the guys who are part of his coalition probably want him to go way further. So he has to like appease them And there's also the issue where, like, if he gets removed from office, he's probably going to spend the rest of his life in jail. So at this point in time, like, what does he have to lose? You might as well cast the die. You might as well just go ape shit, go balls to the wall, dictator North Korea mode, because like, what other options do you have at this point in time? I just don't know. But that's kind of where we're at the moment, where Netanyahu is just kind of trapped in a prison of his own making. Constantine Martelli says nobody likes him on the world stage either. Putin and Trump spent years courting him, and he burnt all the goodwill he had with him. Well, he burnt whatever goodwill. Like Israel was, I don't know if you guys remember, but like back in the '90s and 2000s, Israel was like global enemy number one, and the Western media was doing such a good job, like demonizing Russia and demonizing China and stuff like that. And I feel like the left in most Western countries had basically forgotten Israel existed, or they'd become pro-Israel, or just like the Palestinians weren't the current thing anymore. I remember when I was in university, like it was commonplace for that uh commonplace for like people in my classes to talk about how they wanted Israel to be exterminated. Like I would almost say it was like left wing anti Semitism was kind of what you got. How radical a lot of it was. Um, well, I'm not saying the ICC is going to indict him. I'm just saying if they don't indict him, then basically everybody's just going to tell him to fuck. It's going to tell them to fuck off, and all the third world countries will start withdrawing from it, and just no one will take it seriously anymore. If they do indict him, then they're going to be an anti-Semitic. It's just like another Shoah organization, um, who's going to be defunded by the Western states that give us like they're just screwed. And this was all because they decided to insert themselves in and uh, endorse Putin. Um, and indict Putin to win some temporary political points. And at the time, they were like, "Oh, we blew Putin out." Once again, also, let me see: is Israel a signatory to the statute? Let me see here, because Russia's not even a signatory to the Rome Statute. So, like, Russia doesn't even acknowledge that the International Criminal Court has any kind of sway. Uh, no, Israel is not a party to the Rome Statute. I think. Yeah. Let's see, what does it say? I think Israel signed it and then withdrew its signatory. So once again, like Russia, China, India, the United States, Ethiopia, Indonesia, Pakistan, Vietnam, Thailand, basically most of the world's largest countries are not signatories to the Rome Statute. Um, Ukraine isn't either. I mean, they signed it, but it's not been ratified. So Ukraine's not even like a formal part of it. So basically, everywhere they lose one way or another. Um, the UN, I don't know how like the UN is. I mean, the UN will probably survive this, but it's pretty rough. This isn't like the '90s anymore with the unipolar moment where the U.S. can just vote against the rest of the world continually and expect there to be no sort of pushback from anybody. Like I think in one of the more recent votes, France actually voted for a ceasefire. So it's rough though. It's rough. So Yeah, I don't know what Baby's going to do at this point in time. Also, the like somebody John Mersheimer pointed out when he was being interviewed, there's no guarantee that whoever succeeds Netanyahu isn't going to be more radical than him. Like, is going to be an even like is going to be like even more like over the top hardliner. Because the ultra orthodox like far right parties are continuing to gain power as time goes on, and as the demographic situation continually shifts in their favor, it's just kind of a matter of time at this point. Um, as things continue to worsen. So yeah. So I don't know. It's just I don't see how this situation can end. Like, what is the best case scenario? Uh, Like, because it's not going to go back to the status quo before. Israel's not going to accept a two-state solution at this point in time. Uh, Egypt's not going to reabsorb the Gaza Strip. Jordan's not going to reabsorb the West Bank. There's literally no solution to this problem that doesn't involve ethnically cleansing the Palestinians, at least from the West Bank. I don't see any way that this can be resolved. Other than that, or just going back to the status quo, and Gaza goes back to being a prison camp. So, once again, I think people sometimes forget that a lot of what I say is me attempting to analyze things, and is not necessarily how I feel about the situation. Like, I'm trying to say how the world feels about Israel um, carpet bombing the Gaza Strip, not necessarily how I feel about it. I'm not nearly as sympathetic to Hamas as I seem at sometimes. I just that is to most of the world what it looks like is Netanyahu's unhinged, that he lost it after Hamas launched an attack, and he's like pursuing basically genocidal policies against the Palestinians and blowing up hospitals and making crazy speeches about the end times and stuff like that. Now, is that the case? Maybe or maybe not, but that is what the optics of the situation are. It's like how China started to portray itself as like the great nation of peace, like that. They're making peace deals between Saudi Arabia and Iran. They're the reasonable ones. They're the ones who are like anti-imperialism and all this stuff. Is that actually true? Partially true, partially not true. But the fact is that they're actually like their optics are actually pretty good at the moment. I don't like communist China. I've never liked communist China, but they are like not acting completely retarded like the U.S. is acting. Like Biden going to Israel, hugging Bebe, and saying, "Oh well, we're going to. You have a blank check, Bebe. You can do whatever you want. You can carpet bomb the Gaza Strip." Uh, okay, Bob John says I can agree with you on the optics. You're right, Argent. Yeah, like when I'm talking about the BRICS and stuff like that, part of it is just the optics of the BRICS. Like the BRICS have much better optics than the U.S., and I've been saying this for a long time. That the U.S., and I'm sorry if I keep repeating myself, basically says if you want to do business with us, if you want to have relations with us, you have to suck our dick, you have to prostrate yourself, you have to legalize gay marriage, you have to fully legalize abortion, you have to accept unlimited immigration. You basically have to culturally turn your country into like a neoliberal um, hellscape and just do everything we tell you to do, and then you can be our subordinate and we'll treat you like you're a slave. Is basically kind of how the U.S. is. Whereas China's like, okay, well, we don't really care about your internal political system. We just want to make money. and we want you to make money and us to make money with you. We're just going to come here. We're going to build roads. We're going to build factories. We're going to buy your resources, and we're not going to like bother with your internal politics. And for most people, if you're given those two deals, like someone who's at least pretending to treat you like an adult and is willing to listen to your concerns and at least pretend to meet them, versus someone who basically demands unconditional surrender out of the gate, I mean, who are you going to side with? If you're like Uganda or some African country that still has fairly conservative views of like on social issues, China, are you going to go with China, who's like, you guys can do whatever you want? I just want to buy stuff from you in a legitimate business deal, or the U.S., who's like, no, you have to completely abandon your entire culture and religion and everything, and just embrace pause. Now, once again, I don't think China are the good guys. I think I'm sure China is scamming all these people. And I'm sure they're trapping a lot of people with low agency and high time preference into to debt traps that they'll never be able to pay off. But they're at least able to like have decent optics doing it. They at least like, I kind of respect it to a certain extent that like Western countries are like, no, we can't do business with like these corrupt third world countries because the people who run them are too retarded to make this. Like they don't have agency, so we can't really trust them to like be able to make business deals. And China's just like, look, we just want the oil. Just yeah. Whoever the like flavor of the dictator of the week is, yeah, we totally support you, man. Yeah, more power to you. Just let us get that oil. Just let us get that oil. And I kind of respect the just complete Machiavellian nature of it. Once again, don't make me. I'm not trying to say that it's morally right what China does. I'm just saying at least they're acting morally wrong in their self-interest, and at least they're getting something out of it. Like once again, this was I think my favorite point someone made about the Iraq War. Like the worst part of the Iraq War is that the U.S. didn't even get the oil. Like if they had have invaded Iraq, got in the oil, and like gas prices went down in the U.S. But based like that would have been like at least there would have been some kind of accomplishment for it. Instead, it was like this G slur. We're gonna build democracy and Iran's gonna pay for it type thing that went absolutely nowhere and just wasted trillions of dollars and decades of time. Like, can you imagine what the U.S. could have done with the money they wasted on Iraq? Like, they could have rebuilt their highway system. Imagine if that had have gone into nuclear power. Imagine if that had of like, how about just give it back to the American people in the form of a tax cut? Just cut taxes, maybe pay down the debt a bit. Like, the money could have been spent. You know what? Just give all the money to. Yeah, they did get oil. They have military bases in Syria. Well, they got the oil from Syria. Um, I don't know how much they actually got from Iraq ultimately. Gas went down under Trump. Okay, so maybe it did. Okay, well, I stand corrected. I mean, it is what it is, I guess. I do like the crocodile tears that like they complain that Hezbollah or whoever is attacking their bases in Syria, they're like occupying they're occupying parts of Syria that the internationally recognized government has asked them to leave. And if they get shot at, they're complaining. It's like going into someone's house and like saying I live here now, and then the person shoots you, and then you yell that they violated the NAP or something. It's some like autistic shit like that. But I don't know. What would be interesting is how Trump would have dealt with this whole thing. Because while Trump was, I think, a much more rational actor on a lot of foreign policy issues, he was probably and remains the most pro-Israeli president in U.S. history. So who knows? He might have been saying, like, telling Bebe to just do it, like, just go for it, seek out the final solution to the Palestinian question. Just do it, Bebe. Ethnically cleanse the West Bank and Gaza Strip. You know you want to. So yeah, so Bebe is basically in like this hell scenario, and I just don't see a way out. Like if somebody in the chat says, "How do you think this can end?" Like I'm not even talking about what would the good ending be, what would the best case scenario be, what would a scenario be at this point in time? Like what conclusions are even physically possible? Because I mean they can't do this military operation forever. Um, you have a large portion of the Israeli adult male population who's not in the workforce. The country's losing like tens or hundreds of millions of dollars a day. The economy is going to go like is just going to be fucked. It can't go on forever. So I just don't even know how it will end. Endless military occupation in Gaza. I guess, but once again, that's not like is Israel just gonna like is the idea that like they're gonna occupy Gaza and the US is gonna pay for it? Like they're just gonna get the US to give them however much money it takes to indefinitely occupy the Gaza Strip. And that's how they're gonna solve like the massive budget shortfalls. Because keep in mind you have like what is it hundreds of thousands you have like what 2 to 5% of the adult male population or whatever, and more than that of the actual working population who's in the army now, who's not doing productive labor, who's not paying taxes. Well, I guess they're paying taxes on their government salaries, but you get what I mean. People who are not engaged in economically productive behavior. The other interesting question is what is China going to do in this situation? Because there's the one school of thought that says the Americans aren't watching. Now it's time to go for Taiwan. But I don't. So John Mersheimer said he doesn't think that. He thinks what China will do is it'll throw its weight around a bit and put some pressure on the Philippines and maybe try to resolve some of its maritime disputes and improve its position, like just kind of passively or just be a little bit more aggressive, but in like a diplomatic sense, and try to position itself as more of the leader of East Asia. But I don't really see what China has to gain to go to war like over Taiwan. Regardless of what happens, invading Taiwan would be incredibly expensive. The Chinese government isn't stupid. Um, I just don't see what they'd have to gain over it. They might saber rattle a bit. The U.S. still like I'm not one of these people who thinks the U.S. Army is like complete garbage. The U.S. still has immensely powerful carriers and aircraft and missiles. They've blown through a lot of it on Ukraine. But if I was the Chinese, I would not want to fight the U.S. Navy under any circumstances. Can you imagine trying to like if the U.S. had like three carrier groups defending Taiwan? Um, if I was trying, I would not want to go up against that. Um, I mean, I'm not confident that I've seen so many different things. I don't have a particularly high opinion of the Chinese military. Um, I don't. I have no confidence that they would be able to take Taiwan. Now, Serp's opinion of this is China has enough missiles that they could launch an overwhelming decapitation strike and basically just kill the entire like ruling government of Taiwan in an initial strike, and that would basically paralyze Taiwan's ability to make decisions. And if they moved fast enough, but still getting like an army out there, like getting there before the U.S. can intervene at all, it it just doesn't seem it just doesn't seem possible at the moment. Also, John Mearsheimer also pointed this out. China thinks that things are going in their future, things are moving in their direction, and the Chinese are very willing to be patient. I remember during the when China was industrializing, they were willing to let Japan and American stuff build a bunch of factories in China on disadvantaged terms, um, disadvantageous terms, with the understanding that they were building up uh, a class of people, like a class of Chinese engineers, of Chinese workers, of Chinese middle managers, who they could then use when eventually, like, to eventually build their own factories. And they were willing to take the loss, and they were willing to kind of do the shitty jobs no one else wanted to do for decades, with the understanding that it was gradually making their way up the road. I don't think I think China thinks in terms of decades and maybe even centuries, whereas the U.S. thinks in very short term because of media cycle. That is one of the benefits of having a dictatorship and a relatively stable one. But so I don't know. I just don't think that I don't know. I just have my doubts that the Chinese government is crazy enough to start a war over Taiwan. They might do some saber rattling. They might try to scare Japan a bit. They might try to scare the Philippines a bit. Maybe push around some of the other U.S. allies. But I don't know. I just think it's crazy. The idea. I just whatever you think about the Chinese leadership, I don't think they're crazy, and I don't think they want a shooting war with the U.S. Um, under any circumstances. China has all kinds of other issues it has to deal with in the meantime. So its demographic crisis, its environmental crisis, its overinvestment crisis, resource problems. There's a lot of other issues China has to fry. Also, to my understanding, uh, the other thing, the other thing is China is probably in a good position to negotiate with the U.S. at the moment. So if they want the U.S. to maybe
I need time to prepare
I really don't think the Biden administration wants a crisis in East Asia. So Xi might be able to go to Biden and try to get some concessions out of him and be like, look, you guys are dealing with two complete disasters at the moment. We both know you can't deal with another one. So what we're going to do is we're going to not stir up trouble in East Asia, but you're going to have to give us something. What percentage of Vancouver is Chinese? I'm not gonna look it up because honestly I don't look that stuff up anymore. Um, Constantine says I keep pressing the point, but I firmly believe the Taiwanese crisis ends with a bloodless reintegration. I tend to agree. I don't think. I think what will probably happen is you'll probably eventually have
I'm
a
outside.
one country two systems kind of thing where Taiwan will just nominally be part of China. They'll nominally acknowledge the mainland government. but the mainland government will have no actual authority over Taiwan, and it'll keep its current political system. And I think that agreement would at least make everybody somewhat happy. Um, the issue is, like, to my understanding, the KMT and the CCP actually have pretty decent relations these days, and both sides kind of hope that they're gonna like come to some sort of deal in the future and have a reunited China. I don't think that the KMT seriously believes that they're the one government of all of China, but they think they don't want Taiwan to be separated from it. So they might be able to come to an agreement with the mainland. I've heard that the KMT is funded largely by China, by mainland China in Taiwan. Let's see here. Second, sorry, I'm just texting someone. So yeah, I just don't see Taiwan, China doing that. I could be wrong, but I just don't. China doesn't. China strikes me as a very cautious country, and I can't see them wanting to pick a fight with the U.S. So there was an interesting article. So apparently, mainland China has largely rehabilitated Chiang Kai Shek. I'm not sure because I have some Chinese viewers. I think I'm not sure if people can speak to this, but uh, his reputation has largely been restored um, on the mainland. I was reading that like he's actually a pretty popular figure now. The Communist Party kind of quietly rehabilitated him and portrayed him as like a Chinese patriot who fought against foreign influence and did his best against Japan. And they tried to portray him as being more of a like a misguided figure, but someone who genuinely loved China than like the Antichrist, like how they might have previously portrayed him. I think that's kind of a step in that direction of trying to kind of reconcile with Taiwan. But he is, I do find that a very interesting, like, rehabilitation. Um, so, the real issue is the Taiwanese independence movement, which, yeah, I just don't know how that's going to play out. I feel like if the KMT ever takes power again in Taiwan, there'll just be another colored revolution and overthrow them, and then they'll declare independence or something crazy like that. So that's kind of where I'm at with this entire thing. As I've said, I'm actually a lot more sympathetic. Um, just like how the left rehabilitated Hamilton from an evil white man to a progressive hero in the last few years somehow. Um, well, modern China, like Deng Xiaoping's China, is a lot closer to China under Chiang Kai Shek in a lot of ways than it was to Maoist China. Um, it resembles a lot more, I think, Sun Yat Sun's vision for China than it does Mao's. So it kind of makes sense, especially since the Chinese Communist Party at least pays lip service to nationalism as like a main source of power. Yeah, I think Putin initially was more of a liberal conservative, to be honest, if you know what liberal conservatism is. I think he thought Russia had its unique political system that was more conservative and more statist and more um, collectivist than the tradition you had in the West. But I do legitimately believe that prior to the Georgia conflict, Putin wanted to integrate Russia into the European Atlantic system, or at least he wanted like friendly, good terms with the U.S., good terms with the EU. I feel like his rhetoric has shifted a lot from Russia being a European country to Eurasianism, and that Eurasianism was kind of a reaction to it, particularly post Georgia. Um, Wanted a Paris, Berlin, Moscow axis up to the Maidan. Yeah, a socialism that is national, if you will. Not exactly. Russia, I think. Let me see if Russia still has a flat tax. I think Russia has a flat tax. Um, it did for a while, at least, have a flat tax. Um, I'm not sure if it does now, but Russia has like a lot of very liberal aspects of economy, also a lot of state capitalist aspects,
That bandit should be
and
around
stuff
here.
like that. Oh, talking of China, not Russia. Okay. Russia's actually, I was the Russian economy is actually booming at the moment. You can say a lot of things about the Russians. You can't really say that they're incompetent when it comes to science, technology, or engineering. Um, like they're pretty competent at that. I mean, you can say a lot of things about the Soviet Union, particularly how widespread the adoption of technology is. But they invented all kinds of cool stuff. They had a very active science and technology development. They invented some things the U.S. didn't. Their space program was initially more advanced. Obviously, their lack of their comparatively paltry electronics industry eventually kind of came back to bite them. But the idea that like Russia was not going to be able to produce any of the stuff that it imported from Germany, like that, like Russia does not have a large technically educated population who could come up with this stuff, was just really dumb. Like, I thought the sanctions were going to be way worse than they were, but apparently Russia is increasing domestic aircraft production. They're trying to set up microchip factories. Putin is was in Kazakhstan. So that the leader of Kazakhstan's like the whole thing where we were like had a falling out with Russia and we were drifting towards America was fake news. We love Russia. Putin's our BFF. Putin's like we're going to start building a bunch of factories in Kazakhstan. We're maybe going to have some more guest workers from there in Uzbekistan. Um, we're gonna outsource some of our industry because we have full employment at the moment, and stuff like that. Um, so once again, I'm not trying to say that Russia is like some perfect Christian paradise. I hope people never get that impression. I'm just saying that the common American image that like Putin is some like thug goofball from a James Bond movie who has no idea what he's doing, and that the Russian people are just complete alcoholic losers, like with no capacity to do anything, is just not true. Like this isn't the 1990s anymore. This isn't like the 1980s anymore. Things have changed a lot there. Um, let's see here. Like Liberian Rebel says, Russia's making cheese and wine now instead of importing it, helping them become more self sufficient. I mean, like Russia probably shouldn't be making wine. I don't know if there's any parts of their country that really should be like that makes sense to make wine in.
I
Like
got
we
the
make
sun.
wine in Ontario, and I don't really know if it makes sense to make it there. I mean, there's lots of parts of the world where it makes sense, like Argentina, Chile, Australia. Like those places make sense to make wine. I just don't know. Maybe even British Columbia, but also I think, and this is a disagreement I have with some people in these circles, particularly people who kind of identify as nationalists. I don't really think there's anything wrong with international trade. I think in most cases, like having good relations with other countries, um, yeah, having good relations with other countries, trading with other countries, cooperating with them, um, having some cultural exchanges, stuff like that. I generally think is a good idea. I do think you have to be active in the world. I just there's certain domestic industries you have to protect. Comparative advantage is a thing. It's just I just think economics are something you can't be um, completely. I think a lot of economics is very technocratic and very situational, and you have to limit how ideologically invested you are in a lot of things. Because if you actually want to do what's right for your country, it often is going with yeah. The other thing with trade is it also has to be within. So like some industries that kind of need protection is you need access, generally speaking, to a basic food supply. You need access to basic food supply. I think the U.S. should have. I think a nationalized defense industry makes sense. I think if the U.S. had a nationalized defense industry, they'd be in a much better spot at the moment. The military-industrial complex they have is a disaster, just a complete and total expensive disaster. So, well, to the point Froggy is saying about how the Russian government treats dissenters. I mean, like, I'm not going to deny that. Like, obviously, they arrest and probably kill a lot of people who dissent, but I mean, our government does that too. Maybe not as direct and or as like as overtly a violent a way,
I know
but
I'm precious
the
metal.
reality of the situation is all societies, democratic or authoritarian, or however you want to describe them, engage in some form of political repression. There's always enemies of the state and viewpoints that are considered unacceptable, and they are persecuted. And if you think your society doesn't do that, it's probably because you're in the majority and you're not the one being persecuted. But and that's not necessarily even a bad thing. Like I think persecuting communists was a good thing, for instance. But my point is the survival of any regime, be it liberal, conservative, fascist, or communist, requires oppression of certain groups in society who seek to overturn the situation. Now, is like the intelligence agency a lot more directly violent in Russia? Are they more open about like killing people or arresting people? Then yes, definitely. But it's the game is just kind of played different in the West. Like so in the West, the idea is um, we will technically not have the state do it, but we have set up a system where you will not be able to work for a living if you say something that is mildly controversial. And so you basically face starvation and eternal poverty if you say something moderately politically incorrect, which is acceptable particularly to conservatives because it's technically not the government doing it; it's private companies on behalf of the government doing it. So like that's okay. And once again, I'm not going to deny that speech is freer in America in a lot of ways than it is in Russia. But Russia also bans the promotion of like sexual degeneracy to
I
children.
need
So I
time
mean,
to prepare for
it's kind of like a pick your poison scenario. I don't think the Russian government is telling kids to cut off their dicks, and
I'm not
uh,
ready yet.
and is arresting parents for like not wanting their kids to get pumped full of hormones. Like, there's lots of nasty things they do too, but it's just kind of that's the reality of the situation. I don't particularly like Islamic countries, but like I really don't like Saudi Arabia. But are there things that Saudi Arabia does that make sense? Yes. I would not want to live there. It looks like hell on earth, but I don't know. A lot of these places I don't like. I think I think you also, once again, I think when you're talking about Russia, you also just have to understand how insane the 90s were there and how bad the Yeltsin era was. Just crime, corruption, general anarchy. Governors were just doing whatever they wanted. The oligarchs were just doing whatever they wanted. Sure, Putin's an oligarch. Um, sure, Putin has a lot of has stolen a lot of money from the Russian state, but at least there's one ruler now instead of a whole bunch of them. Thoughts on basket weaving? I think it's a good idea. I think it's a good idea. That's about all I'm going to say about that. I don't want to be too specific, but if a basket weaving gets set up in your area, I might as well go check it out. Um, there are people in all parts of the world. Um, at least some people who share your views, and I don't know. I think one of the things I liked the most about the alt right, like when it was still a thing, was it allowed like dudes to kind of hang out together, because men need to have like other men who they can relate to and who they can like talk shit with and stuff like that. It's like I think Trump like very much like Trump was on just like I'm not going to defend the stuff Trump said, like the grabber and the pussy thing, but
It is done.
like dudes will just say stuff like between like when they're alone together, and it's not serious. It's not like it's not like anything like that. It's not like anyone's advocating rape or anything. Men just, if they're alone together, just talk bullshit. It's just kind of what they do. So is that not necessarily a good thing? I don't know, but it's just, and I felt like when I kind of started to get involved in these fears, I made a bunch of like male friends, and having like a substantial number of male friends was nice because I hadn't had many prior to that point. Because like I had Abstract, if you know who Abstract is, and we're still very close IRL. But most of my friends in university abandoned me when I became kind of like mildly Christian and mildly conservative. Like I know a lot of people got angry when I because I supported Romney over Obama, and I get that Romney's cringe, but it was like in the primary back then I actually liked Santorum, but I thought that Romney was preferable to Obama for a variety of different reasons, but I do think, and
Ruined all that work.
well, Serpa said this as well, that it would have like I probably would have voted for Obama, even knowing what I know now over McCain, because McCain was a psychopath who would have started a war with Iran. I'm probably just gonna hold my nose and vote conservative in the next election, even though they suck, because they're at least gonna defund the CBC, and the CBC being shut down is amazing. Well, it's just you come across like, yeah, Trump's calling something. But no, like men will just like talk about like, oh, that girl has awesome boobs. I wish I could like motorboat. They'll just say like really crude shit, and it's just them BSing each other, and they don't mean anything by it. But if
Once again.
like an outsider hears it, it sounds really bad. That's kind of like a so that's kind of the thing with bullying. Like when people say that bullying is good, I think bullying I think bullying is very contextual, and I think it's if you have like male friends and you know they have your best interest in mind and they want to kind of press you a bit and just be like, look, dude, stop being an F slur. Um, stop being an F slur. Stop stuff like that. Um, get your life together. Stop staying in your mother's basement. I think that's very different than just some random assholes beating up on you at school. I think is the case. I don't think bullying in school helps kids. I think it makes them into bitter. Uh, I think it fucks them
I'm
up.
not ready yet.
It's one of the worst aspects of public school. I don't think your male friends giving you a bit of a hard time and trying to tell you to get your head out of your ass is the same thing as like some dude, some asshole throwing you into a locker. Um, so no, it's just I hate the whole like I don't see it that much anymore, but I remember that was a thing like back in the day, a contrarian opinion that like bullying was based. And we needed to toughen kids up. I just don't think it works that way. I think it just makes kids into like school shooters and stuff. It's one of the worst
I'm
aspects
not
of public
ready yet.
schools. So, but no, but just like once I started having more male friends, and like I've made, I can say this because Serp talked about it. So like Serp got married recently, so I got to go and meet. I met with him in person, and I got to hang out with him and some other guys I know from online, and I got to meet his wife and stuff. And like I consider Serp and I like to be real friends, like not internet friends, not like just fellow travelers who talk. I consider him to be like a real friend of mine. I sometimes have Torellian on. I consider him to be my real friend. I've met with him back when we both used to live in Toronto. We would hang out together every now and again. I consider him to be a real friend. So, and just there's some other people, but like we know who we are. We talk about our lives and stuff like that. And it's just something I didn't really have because like my best friend um, for most of my life literally abandoned me because I was against immigration and I made fun of gypsies. He got like really upset because I was making fun of gypsies, and he basically said he didn't want to be my friend anymore because of that, which is like the most G sort thing ever. I wasn't even like a race. Yeah, Serp got married. No, his wife is a lovely, lovely girl. She's a very nice woman. I wasn't gonna talk about it until he mentioned it in a video, but he mentioned it in his Five Nights at Freddy's review. So I feel okay mentioning it. I wouldn't give out that piece of personal information if he had already. Yeah, we watched Scooby Doo. We watched Scooby Doo on Zombie Island. We some of our other friends. We played Left 4 Dead 2. We played some Halo, some Godzilla games. It was pretty awesome. So Montana's a beautiful state. It's a little more rustic than I'm used to. I'm gonna be honest. I do technically live in Western Canada now, but I live in an urban area and surrounded by farmland. The Manitoba's actually like not as bad as people say. Like there's a lot of nice stuff. There's actually a lot of natural beauty in Manitoba. Because keep in mind, Eastern and Central Manitoba is on the Canadian Shield, so it's very much like Northern Ontario, where you have like boreal forest. You have like the stark beauty of like the massive sheets of rock, like glacial lakes and stuff. It is actually very pretty. Lake Winnipeg is also a pretty nice place, but it's not as bad as Saskatchewan. Saskatchewan is just flat as a pancake. So, as I've said, I kind of I don't mind just being able to have a one bedroom like decent sized apartment and not having to put my entire salary into it. I think was almost alone worth it. I'm sure Rain certainly appreciates it. She is currently sitting on her hammock, staring out of the window. So I'm gonna go back to Ontario to see my family at Christmas. I think I'm gonna get someone to come in and check on Rain, rather than bring her back with me, because it's just a massive pain to bring your pet on a plane. So if you bring your pet on a plane, you have to manually check in, and you have to take them through security. And I have like pills I use to dope Rain up, and she's not very happy about it, and she'll be fine for a week. Rain is 3 years old. I got her in 2020, I think. I think it was 2020. I got her during COVID, so she's 2 or 3 years old. Um, so I'm happy with her. Um, she's a good girl. I periodically try to play with her. She doesn't really like to play with me much, but she is pretty affectionate. She does like to sit in my lap. She does like nuzzle me, or it's called bunting with cats. She does do that a lot. She's always really happy to see me in the morning. I don't let her sleep in my bedroom because she would just jump on me at night, and I just can't deal with that. So I'll say this. The whole like cat versus dog debate is kind of dumb. It's kind of situational. So dogs are kind of the ultimate pet in a lot of ways because they're so interactive. Because you can go walking with them, you can teach them tricks, you can do all kinds of amazing stuff with them. But dogs are not like a low maintenance pet. Like you have to take them for walks. If you have like a house with a big backyard, or better yet, if you live out in the country, a dog is an amazing pet. Um, there's no better pet if you're out in the country or something like that, or if you have the lifestyle where you can walk your dog every day. Um, but for a lot of people, that just isn't practical. Also, like, because dogs need a lot of exercise. Like, Rain's an indoor cat. Cats can be perfectly happy, like, as indoor cats. Dogs need to get out and need to get exercise and stuff. And if you can't do that, also you have to let dogs out to use the bathroom. So you don't have to do that with cats. So I don't know. I think it's very much like a lifestyle thing. The other thing is like dogs are the most loving, loyal creatures in the world. But if you don't give them attention, they go insane. Um, like they will just get depressed and upset if you don't give it to them. If that's what you want, like once again, if you have a lot of time and effort to put into having a dog, then uh, so with cats, if cats never become like are always indoor cats, they don't really mind as much. Keep in mind, indoor cats live about 3 or 4 times as long as outdoor cats. Um, I don't know. Also, outdoor cats kill a lot of wild animals, but no. But I kind of think that's how you have to think about it. It's um so is like as Clint put it, like if you have a rep like if you have a cat, he'll sit and watch a movie with you, um, hang out with you for a while, then go back to whatever it is they're doing. They cats are actually very. I find Rain at least is very social. A lot of her socialization though just consists of sitting and staring at me for hours at a time. So they're kind of low maintenance that way. I think, as Clint put it, cats don't really need people. Um, what I find interesting is so a friend of mine knows this Christian Algerian guy, and he was saying how in the Muslim world, cats are kind of communal property. So, like in Muslim Islamic cities, there will just be massive, like there'll just be tons of stray cats, but the cats won't exactly be like feral because like the community will provide for them and like pet them and stuff, so they'll be socialized decently well, and they'll be healthier than like a stray cat would be. And if people want a cat as a pet, they'll just grab one off the street that they like. Like they just see a cat, like, oh, that's a cute cat, and then they'll just take it home and like spay and neuter it, and get its injections, and then that'll be its cat. That'll be their personal cat. But no, apparently in the Islamic world, that's how it just works in most cities. I mean, say a lot for about Muhammad. He did like his kitties. So because of that, I kind of like how things work in Islam. Like if Muhammad likes something, it's good. Because Muhammad liked cats, Muslims like cats. I think cats are even allowed in mosques because they're considered a ritually clean animal. Uh, Clint said that cats basically domesticated themselves because they started living around us when we started farming because the grain that we grew drew in a lot of rodents, and we just kind of at his house for weeks. um, but no, but the Algerian guy was like couldn't understand the concept of buying a cat. It just seemed really weird to him. He was just like, why don't you just take one of the ones off the street? They're like, because they're like feral and mean. He's like, what are you talking about? Stray cats are lovely animals. It's just like, it doesn't work the same way here that it does over there. I think at one point, actually, the Saudi Arabian like religious police had banned ownership of cats briefly, and it was just like, dude, you're like way more extreme than Mohammed because Mohammed liked cats. My friend Abstract came up with a funny term, which is meth, which stands for more extreme than Hitler, which I kind of find funny. But, anyways, I think I covered Bebe's Inferno. Maybe I'll edit that part out to be a separate one. Um, I do hate the whole narrative that the Black Death was caused because Christians thought that like cats were satanic creatures, and they were like wiping out the cats, and that led to an increase in the rat population. I don't think that. So I do think you should spay and neuter cats because large cat populations are very harmful on the environment. Like they just kill a lot of animals. So I think they've driven multiple species to extinction. But anyway, that's all I had to say. God bless everyone. Have a great coming up week, and lots more exciting content to come.